Kentucky's Voice is your home for real news, real people, and real answers. But we can't do it without you. Your financial support helps us bring truth to the forefront, hold leaders accountable, and give a voice to the people of the Commonwealth. Join the fight today. Give online at kyvoice.org or text KYVoice to 535. Every gift makes a difference. Stand with us. Speak up. Stay strong. You are Kentucky's voice.
Are you ready to stand for truth? Kentucky is at a crossroads, and we need voices that won't back down. This is your moment to rise, speak up, and be part of a movement that's changing the narrative in the Commonwealth. Kentucky's Voice is calling on bold citizen journalists, fearless editors, and those unafraid to speak truth in the public square. Volunteer, intern, contribute. Scan the QR code or visit kyvoice.org to join the fight. This is more than media. This is your moment. You are Kentucky's voice.
Open borders, shameful abandonment, disregard for human life, the prospect of more mandates and lockdowns, and the list goes on. Now more than ever, we need to stick together. Voting alone is not enough. We must use our dollars to support like-minded companies that fight for our rights and beliefs. Patriot Mobile is America's only Christian conservative wireless provider who shares your values. Last year, we gave more than $500,000 to conservative causes. With your support, we'll give more than $1.5 million this year. It's time to band together and support companies that truly love America and fight for our freedoms. Will you join us?
Kentucky's Voice is your home for real news, real people, and real answers. But we can't do it without you. Your financial support helps us bring truth to the forefront, hold leaders accountable, and give a voice to the people of the Commonwealth. Join the fight today. Give online at kyvoice.org or text KYVoice to 53555. Every gift makes a difference. Stand with us. Speak up. Stay strong. You are Kentucky's voice.
Are you ready to stand for truth? Kentucky is at a crossroads, and we need voices that won't back down. This is your moment to rise, speak up, and be part of a movement that's changing the narrative in the Commonwealth. Kentucky's Voice is calling on bold citizen journalists, fearless editors, and those unafraid to speak truth in the public square. Volunteer, intern, contribute. Scan the QR code or visit kyvoice.org to join the fight. This is more than media. This is your moment. You are Kentucky's voice.
Open borders, shameful abandonment, disregard for human life, the prospect of more mandates and lockdowns, and the list goes on. Now more than ever, we need to stick together. Voting alone is not enough. We must use our dollars to support like-minded companies that fight for our rights and beliefs. Patriot Mobile is America's only Christian conservative wireless provider who shares your values. Last year, we gave more than $500,000 to conservative causes. With your support, we'll give more than $1.5 million this year. It's time to band together and support companies that truly love America and fight for our freedoms. Will you join us?
This is Kentucky's Voice Radio, covering the latest state and local issues with Tom Fallbush, Bob Scott, and Jim Waters.
Howdy, Kentuckiana. This is your special host, Dr. Lance Pearson from the Kentucky Liberty Caucus, here with you on 970 AM. We also will be rebroadcasting this show tonight on WBNA, that's channel 21 on Spectrum. And we'll also have some, if you want to find the Kentucky's Voice YouTube channel, we also do a rebroadcast for the people who are more visual learners, if we'll say that. This is Kentucky's Voice, where we cover Kentucky politics and Louisville area politics. I like to say Louisville area politics from Westport to West Point, from Floyd's Knobs down to Knobs Creek. And then we cover Kentucky politics from Pikeville all the way over to the Purchase, and from Corbin all the way up to Covington. So we've got a jam-packed show today. I have with me a candidate for State House that is going to make his official announcement beyond Facebook for a race that I'm really excited about. And we have on State Senator Lindsey Titchener a little bit later. So let's get right into it. Our first guest for the first segment is going to be Cole Cusick. Cole is a very good friend of mine. I met him when I was in Frankfurt doing issue advocacy. He was doing issue advocacy on some similar issues. He's a young, energetic candidate whose candidacy I'm really excited about. And keep in mind, these elections will be for next year. But even though the filing deadline is January, a lot of people like to get into this race and start fundraising and building up volunteers and getting the word out early. And Cole has basically getting ready to make his official announcement. So can we bring on Cole?
Hey, Lance, thank you for having me on.
Yeah, great to see you, Cole. If for the people on the radio, obviously you can't see this, but you can see Cole is a young entrant into Kentucky politics. He's got a lot of great ideas, and I'm excited for him to get into the State House because I really think he's going to be an advocate that's going to move the General Assembly forward. So, Cole, let's jump right into it. Just announce your candidacy. What State House race are you running for?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, Lance, my name is Cole Cusick, and I'm running for the State House of Representatives in Kentucky, House District 63. It's a district that covers a portion of Boone County, mainly around the airport, CVG, and also Kenton County. I've got Fort Mitchell, Crescent Springs, Villa Hills, Ludlow, and a portion of Erlanger. Lance, my district is conservative. We come from an area where faith and family is so important to our communities. We've got great private schools and public schools in the area, and I'm really excited to represent this district.
Yep, that's music to my ears. And for the people that aren't that familiar with maybe Kentucky geography, Boone County and Kenton County are just south of Cincinnati. So this is a northern Kentucky district. Very conservative part of the state and actually really leading on a lot of liberty issues. Okay, so first, let me just say thank you for serving. Why don't you tell us all a little bit about your background? What's, your family life? What do you do now when you're not campaigning? And for people that aren't that familiar with the General Assembly, the state legislature is really a part-time position. Unless a person is retired or has a lot of savings, they usually have a job on the side. And then they spend the 2 or 3 months at the start of the year in the session, and then some time over the summer working on legislation. So it really fills your schedule. but it isn't like at the federal level where that's a full-time job. And then kind of tell us also about some of your community ties to that area where you're running.
Sure. Yeah, I'm married for 8 years. I got my beautiful wife. We have three children together. They're 6 years old, 5, and 1. My family moved to House District 63 back in 1949. And ever since then, my family has been deeply tied to this community and serving this community. Back when Ronald Reagan deregulated the trucking industry, my grandfather, who came from nothing in eighth grade education, he ended up starting a business and a successful trucking business. And right around that same time, they started a church, Gathering Place Church, in Florence, Kentucky. And a few years later, they started a private school, Zion Christian Academy, where I was blessed to attend and where my children attend as well. I come from a family of small business owners. My parents, both of my brothers were in the construction industry, the housing industry. I own a small business in rehabbing houses and land, buying and selling land. I work with my hands, and I really, really enjoy that work. My brother is now the pastor at Gathering Place Church. That's where my family attends. And we love serving our community. And I come from a legacy of service to this community, dating back generations. And that's why my desire is to continue that on, the legacy of my family, and to continue advocating for conservative values. I've worked for Congressman Massey out of college in constituent services and assisting him and the staff. And I've worked for two conservative nonprofit organizations that advocated for family values, conservative values, the life issue, religious liberty, and school choice. Most recently for the Commonwealth Policy Center, which is where I've crossed paths with you. But yeah, that's some of my background.
Okay. It's a fantastic background. I think that's really going to appeal to the voters in your district. So you mentioned Commonwealth Policy Center. For the people who aren't familiar, they're one of the most influential social conservative advocacy groups there in the state. They're led by my good friend, Pastor Richard Nelson. Why don't you tell us a little bit about them and what you did for them? Like, what is it to be an issue advocate up there in Frankfort?
Yeah, when I came in, my goal and my job was to work with legislators, pastors, community advocates, and to get conservative legislation passed in our General Assembly. We worked on issues like school choice, the life, being pro-life, protecting life, and then also on issues like stopping radical LGBT ideologies in our classrooms, transgender procedures for minors, defending women's sports, making sure that we're stepping down our state income tax, healthcare reform, certificate of need reform. So, I helped recruit candidates to run for office, to train them, and to make sure that, particularly in primaries and in generals, the voters had information about where the candidates stood on the issues. We hosted forums around the state in Boone County, Shelby County, and some online forums. So we wanted to make sure voters had the most amount of information to make the best decision for their representation in Frankfort.
Man, so that's a lot. That's a lot of preparation for somebody who might want to run for office. We'll talk a little bit with Lindsay Titchener a little later about what kind of background people have when they go into the General Assembly, but I would say yours is pretty impressive. So you've already done a lot of political work. What caused you to kind of get into actually running for office? Like, why are you running, basically?
Yeah, I'm running on three things, but the reason I'm running, Lance, is what I kind of mentioned earlier. I've only grown up in a family and around people who put their community first. They protect their families and they desire to serve their communities, seeing my grandparents, my family, all those around me. And living in this district, I believe that it's time for a generation of new conservative leadership. And that's some of the things I'm running on. My campaign platform, Lance, is first to protect children, both from the violence of abortion and from radical transgender ideologies and procedures. The state has done a great job of moving forward the protection of children, and I'm going to continue to stand for those same exact values. The second is to eliminate taxes. The state has also stepped down our state income tax to 3.5%. But as a representative, if I'm elected in House District 63, I will not be satisfied until that goes down to 0%. We've got neighboring states like Tennessee who have 0% state income tax, and the workers of this district, they deserve to keep more of their hard-earned money. I also believe in reforming our property tax system. Housing has become even more unaffordable. We've got our senior citizens and first-time home buyers who are priced out of the market. And unfortunately, property taxes continue to rise with rising home prices. I'm going to push to reform and ultimately eliminate that as well. And lastly, I'm going to defend constitutional liberties, both our rights to free speech, religious liberty, and our right to self-defense. I'm a big believer in the natural law that our rights do not come from government, they're not given to us by man, but they come from our Creator. And I believe that our rights cannot be taken away from government, and I will not infringe on the rights of my constituents.
Okay, that's music to my ear. It sounds like you hit on social conservatism, fiscal conservatism, and then constitutional conservatism. That's right up my alley. So, if people want to learn more about you, maybe actually read a little bit more detail about this platform that you're pushing, and if they just basically want to start supporting your campaign, like we say, the primaries aren't until the May of next year, but fundraising starts almost immediately. And trying to build a coalition in order to get yourself elected starts. So where do we go to find out more, and how do we support you?
Yeah, Lance, as you know, campaigns are not cheap. I'm expecting a very expensive race, but you can go to my website, which is Coal for Kentucky. That's all spelled out. .com, and I've got my campaign kickoff on August 19th at 7 p.m. at Triple Crown Country Club. I'm gonna have a lot of my friends and family and political advocates there. My friend I grew up with, who's a great talent, he's gonna be singing a couple of songs for us, and I'm gonna be laying out the details of my campaign and the path forward, the new vision, a new generation of conservative leadership for House District 63.
Okay, so that's Cole, COLE, FOR, Kentucky.com.
Yes.
So not coal like the stuff we're pulling out of Eastern and Western Kentucky, COLE, for Kentucky.com. I've gone to the website. You can donate directly from the website. You can also RSVP if you want to go to Northern Kentucky for that kickoff. Last thing I'll say is I'm already so supportive of your campaign. I'm going to make this deal with our listeners. If Cole can raise however much money he raises between now and the 18th, right before his campaign kickoff, I'm going to quarter match it. So if he raises $1,600, I'm going to throw in the $400 to get him to $2,000. So up to $400, quarter match. Please go to Cole's website and give to his campaign. We'll be right back after the break with Senator Lindsey Titchener. Thank you, Cole.
Thank you.
Kentucky's Voice Radio, online at kyvoice.org.
Welcome back. I'm your host again, Dr. Lance Pearson. This next segment and the rest of the show, we're going to have a special guest, Senator Lindsay Titchener, who lives in Oldham County, but we'll get into kind of what her district looks like. I'll just say I know Lindsay very well. I've supported her campaign before she even decided to run, kind of encouraging her to get into the race, and she's been fantastic. She's also the first female guest that we've had on. So just kind of here's a question for you. So when I go on dates, I'll often hear the person that I'm on a date with say something like, "You really got a face for radio."
Oh, yeah.
All right. I've never really understood what that means. But then now that I'm hosting a radio show, I'm like, how did they know years ago that I was going to be hosting here on 970 AM, Kentucky's Voice? You have any thoughts?
We're real intuitive. We can really read people well.
Okay. That's fantastic. All right. So, Lindsay, why don't you just kind of like we did with Cole, why don't you tell me what your background is? You didn't come into this with a really extensive issue advocacy background necessarily, but you really got fired up about some particular issues. But we'll talk about that later. Why don't you just kind of tell us about who you are, where you came from, and go ahead.
So born and raised in Oldham County. My husband and I have been married for 28 years. Is that right? 27? I can't remember. Coming up on 28, maybe. We have 4 kids. 2 are married, and my other daughter is off on her own as well. So 3 adult children, and then I have a freshman heading into high school this in a couple of weeks. My background, I have just hodgepodge done a ton of different things. I was in real estate, still in real estate now, was a teacher at private schools, was a VP in a network marketing company and did sales, and also were missionaries. We spent 4 years in the Dominican Republic. That was where my 4th child was born. And we just have done a lot of different things in our lives. And it's funny how God orchestrates that. And little bits of all of those things have helped me a lot in my time in the Senate.
Right. It's really, really interesting. You've done a lot of really interesting stuff, especially the missionary work. So you come from a background that isn't really focused on politics, actually. Mm-hmm. How did you get into politics? What motivated you to run 4 years ago?
Well, I've always paid attention to more of the higher level of politics, national. That's just what you see on the news, international stuff. My dad was very attuned to what was happening in the world, and we'd always have political discussions. And so he was very influential in my life. But what really got me fired up was what was going on during COVID. And that got me to pay attention to state politics. I never really paid much attention to state politics. And when things started to really just close in on our freedoms and our liberties, and that was when I woke up along with a lot of people in the United States and around the world. So that really drove me into showing up at my school board. I'm one of those school board moms that was probably on Biden's terror watch list. Probably a proud thing to say these days. If I actually was, I don't know. But showing up there and just speaking out for our kids to be able to go to school and to go with their faces free of a mask and not have to be forced to vaccinate. All of those things just got me involved, and then started to uncover what other things we were seeing in the schools with the gender ideology and the CRT and DEI and all of those things that were really being forced on our kids. And that activated me and got me to be interested in running for office. Yeah,
that's fantastic. You basically got a personal connection. You were worried about kids in schools, and that's really continued. We'll get into that in our next segment. But your district is Oldham County,
yes,
Trimble, all of both of those counties, but you also have a little bit of Jefferson County. What part of that is?
I just say Northeast Jefferson, but it's two really separate chunks that don't connect, kind of go up around Westport Road, Goose Creek, Barber Mead, and then also Old New LaGrange Road and around the Ford truck plant. Okay.
All right. Okay. So you've been in office for one term. You're coming up to the end of your next term after next session. You're running for re-election now. This is the first time you've gone through that experience. Yes. So how are you feeling about that?
I'm excited about it. The running for office was one of the most exhausting things I've ever done, aside from selling everything I own and moving to another country and then back. It was exhausting, but it was fun. It was really fun. My team of campaigning, we were just moms and grandmas and all fired up for the same reasons. And it was a real grassroots movement to get me elected. And I'm looking forward to doing that again. I'm excited about whoever is going to run against me. I'm looking forward to having some good discussions and debates. I don't shy away from a debate. I hope we can
We know that.
really dig into some issues on the campaign trail, but I'm looking forward to it.
Okay. And so I know in your first run, you actually got very outspent, but you had a lot of volunteers and a passionate community that kind of made up the difference there. Money is important in politics, but it isn't everything.
Yeah.
So what advice, and so we just had Cole on, you were here for that segment and heard what Cole had to say. What advice would you give to other people that might want to follow your path and get into politics as well, even if they don't have like a really extensive political background?
Well, I can't say do everything I did. I came about this in a very unconventional way, but in the same way that brought about really, the truth of what I'm working towards. And that's, I had a fire in my belly. I had a call of the Lord, and that's what drove me to run. And I think if people have at least those two things, then you're going to see provision in your life. Win or lose, God will redeem the work that you've done and your efforts to try and make a difference and utilize that in a different way. But I'm grateful that just the passion that I have for the issues I was fighting for resonated with the people, and I was able to get elected. And I hope that'll be the same this go round. But anybody who's trying to run for office, just pray about it and see what the answers are that God has for you, and then go for it. And don't be afraid of the big, what I would call the establishment that might be running against you, because you can out knock doors. You can get the votes if you are willing to do the work. Money's not always what you need on your side. You do need some, no doubt. It's a challenge, but you can beat a big giant that might be coming against you.
Okay. And so we can address this right at the start. If people want to find out more about you and about your campaign, where do they go?
You can follow me on Facebook. Just search my name. You'll find it. It's Lindsay Titchener, Senate District 6 or something like that. I'm also on Twitter. Lindsay for Kentucky is my, what do you call those things?
Webpage,
Yeah. So my webpage is Titchener for Senate, and it's outdated. So it's on my list to get done in the next couple of weeks. So I've got to get some more content updated in there since I got elected. But that's where you can find me.
All right. Reach out to her. That's Titchener, TICHENOR for Kentucky, all spelled out, .com.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay. We can even kind of start to kind of get into this. We've got a lot to cover. Most people don't know, but so we talked about this with Cole. The General Assembly meets early in the year, but that isn't the end of all the work. There's a lot of stuff that goes on between, say, the end of March or the end of April, the session end date, and then the next session. So what we have, for example, interim sessions that are happening right now. So talk a little bit about what you're doing in the interim session.
Yeah, so our interim committees meet, and that's when they join up. So the House committees join with the Senate committees, and we just hear from our agencies, get information, some reports come to us so that we can legislate in a proper way. And as we head into the budget, we're hearing a lot of information about, obviously, Medicaid and what's happening at the federal level and how that's affecting them and what that might look like and how we address that issue in the budget next year. But we're also hearing legislation that's coming forward. So a lot of things get proposed in the interim session. That way we can kind of get a little bit more time to do the research on it and figure out what tweaks and changes need to happen for that legislation to move forward in the upcoming session.
Right. So you're kind of talking through issues right now, and you're also potentially drafting legislation. Yeah. So we'll get into some of the work that you've done on education. I know that's a big passion for you in the next segment, but then we'll talk about some new possible legislation there in the last. So we'll get to that. We're going to be back with Lindsay Titchener after the break. We'll be talking about education bills and how this impacts your children. I know school just started in Jefferson County yesterday, maybe the same in Oldham, but there's a lot of changes, and we'll go through each of those changes right after the break. Thank you. Come on back, 970 AM.
back to Kentucky's Voice Radio online at kyvoice.org.
Welcome back to Kentucky's Voice on 970 AM. It's also, this show will be available on TV, also on Channel 21 Spectrum. That's WBNA. And then we'll also have a podcast if you want to search for maybe Lindsay Titchener on Facebook or mine. We'll probably put a link to that podcast so you can watch it if you can't be with us right now. Okay, let's get into kind of what I think might be your passion, but your biggest passion in getting into the legislature, and now continuing with legislation is education. Is that fair to say?
It's definitely high up on the list. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, so as I mentioned right before the break, school just started up again. There's a lot of changes. So let's kind of have our legal expert, the person that wrote a couple of these bills and voted on all of them, that came into effect. And so these are important for everybody that has a child going back to a K through 12 public school. All of these are applicable to you, and so you'll want to know and be aware of the changes that are happening this year. So the first one that we want to talk about, and this is really from two bills, are the influence of cell phones, these electronic devices in schools. There's been a big change from previous years to this one. So the first bill that we want to talk about, the first big change is this came from a bill, HB 208, that Josh Bray, a very good legislator in the House, came up with. But it's basically a public school cell phone ban. So you heard that right. There is going to be a cell phone ban of some type that's governed by your local Board of Education in public schools this year. So tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So unfortunately, this got a little bit watered down when we came to the end, and it allows a provision for teachers to say that kids can use their cell phone. I find it amazing. I was sitting in our board meeting just the other day, and they were discussing this bill and how they're going to implement this. And really our board was, in Oldham County anyways, I haven't heard any other discussions, very adamant on having a strong cell phone policy. They've done their research on this. There's a tremendous book. We had the author come and present to us during the interim last year, The Anxious Generation, talking about the impacts of cell phone usage and really addiction, cell phone addiction of our kids, and how they have access in schools, aside from just clear disruptions in being able to learn and for teachers to be able to teach. It does have some very negative impacts on students and their mental well-being, which we're hearing so much about these days. But it wasn't, the school board is on board. They want a strong policy. They know the benefits of just explicit instruction and not having these cell phones distracting our kids. It was the administrators who were absolutely laying out all the reasons kids have to have their cell phone in schools. And they do not. I was so surprised by that. And I kept thinking to myself, how did I survive? How did you survive? Yeah. How did all of those administrators and board members survive and parents survive? We didn't have phones. We figured it out. We had a system in place where we communicated in a way with our coaches, in a way with our extracurricular activities, with our parents, with our jobs outside of school. And we made it. It's amazing. I guess that's why Gen Xers are so awesome and all the generations that have come before. But so it's something I hope our school boards really develop strong policies around. This is the baseline. Yeah. This is the law. There's nothing to say they can't make it stronger. Yeah. And I really hope that they do for the benefit of our students.
Well, what I would love and what I would recommend for boards of education is take the burden off of the teachers to have to police this. That's really what the legislature was wanting to do.
Absolutely.
They pulled it a little bit back at the end, but just say all the cell phones, the principal is in charge. We're not going to have cell phones in the class. You're here to learn. You're here to focus on what you're doing. You're not bullying people on social media or worrying about, whatever, Snapchat or whatever else is going on in the world. Focus on school when you're in school.
Absolutely.
And this is going to be a theme for all of these bills. Let the teachers teach. Yes. If we can get the behavioral issues and all the distractions out of our schools, that's going to be the biggest thing that we can do to actually advance education in our state.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, this next bill also relates to social media, cell phone stuff, and this is a bill that you actually drafted. This is SB 181. There's been a lot of buzz online about this.
Yep.
But the gist of the bill is staff at schools. That means teachers, but also coaches, who knows, janitors, but
everybody.
basically everybody that works at the school, and you're an adult. If you are not related to a child, you should not be texting or posting clandestine messages with kids in schools. That's the motivation for the bill. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about that, flesh that out a little bit, and talk about some exceptions to that?
Yeah, absolutely. So what we've seen, unfortunately, we've seen a rise of grooming behaviors in our schools and a lot of misconduct, sexual misconduct cases, and really not even sexually related, but ultimately grooming a student in a way that takes them away from their parent, that leads to abuse in the future. And it's all happening through direct communication through technology. From Kentucky's data, it's 88% of those cases happen because they are directly communicating electronically and privately. So this came about really in the 24 session, and I filed the bill originally in 2024 in response to the case that happened in Anderson County, where a counselor took it upon herself to make sure a student was able to continue in a relationship with another girl, and the parents didn't agree with it because their biblical values do not agree with homosexual relationships, and they prohibited their daughter from having those communications. And that counselor manipulated that child in such a way that she got her to a point to record her parents and report them to CPS. Parents had no idea. When they found out, it was with a knock on the door from a social worker from CPS, and they were able to discover 200 text messages between that counselor and their daughter, who was 15 at the time, just about destroyed their family, and the fight that they had to go through, and the fight they had to go through with the school to discipline this counselor, which they did not. Right. And so this really came about to, how do we address the grooming issue? It's a problem. It's a growing problem. It's horrible. It's with staff, volunteers, coaches. It happens all over the place where kids are easily accessible through this open loophole of directly communicating through technology. So trying to close that off, trying to reestablish guardrails that previously existed, your generation, my generation, where we didn't have cell phones, we didn't have that direct access. Did it still happen? Yes, but it wasn't as easy, and children weren't as easily accessible for bad actors to get to them. So that's really what this bill is trying to reestablish. And yes, it's caused quite a bit of outrage from among, and questions too. And we're addressing some of the questions that have come up, and we'll address these next session and clean up any language to make sure that it's implemented in the way that it's intended.
Let me interject. And so it's not unusual that legislation, we roll it out, maybe there's a couple things that we need to tweak, and then the next session they come in and clean it up. That happens all the time. And nobody is claiming that the majority of this type of communication now or in the past has been grooming, but it has happened, and we've got to put in some guardrails. And basically, how are staff members allowed under this regulatory framework to communicate with children?
Right. So the districts need to approve a traceable form of communication, and that can be through one app that's traceable, and there's several out there.
Like Google has one?
Of course. Google Classrooms,
Google
Class
Classrooms,
Dojo, things like that. There's quite a few, actually, that exist. And they can choose multiple. JCPS, I believe, is using seven different traceable apps that they've approved. Mm-hmm. Other schools are keeping it simple and just doing one. Of course, email's traceable. And then there's also exemptions. So parents can give written consent and allow communications to happen, but also it exempts family members, and so people who have legal guardianship over children and relatives. So we'll clean up. A lot of people have been asking about the relative issue, so we will get that cleaned up next session and make that more clear.
But the safeguard here is, if there is a legitimate reason for a staff member to be communicating with your child through text message or something, and if you think about it, there aren't a lot of good reasons. School boards are required to allow those exemptions. So go talk to your principal, go and ask for that exemption form, and just say, this is fine with me, and we'll proceed.
Yeah, and we'll see that a lot with coaches in particular. And there's issues where coaches have reached out to me if they're trying to, promote a student who might be recruited at the college level. Of course, parents obviously are going to sign for consent for those types of communications and social media to happen. But I think we're going to get it all squared away. I know that we will. And I really had hoped to see the education institution come behind me on this one, because this is their reputation that's on the line. And when you see over a 2-year period of time, according to their records, over 135 cases of sexual misconduct from educators, that's so horrible.
Right.
That's a horrible
horrific.
stain, and it should not be happening. Our parents should have confidence that their kids are going to go to school and be safe from some type of behavior like that. So I'm hoping once we get some things tweaked and fixed, we'll have full support from everybody on this issue.
Right. Okay. And we're hitting the heavy ones first. How about SB 19?
Okay.
SB 19 was filed by Rick Girdler, a pretty conservative state senator from Eastern Kentucky. And what it does is it establishes a minimum of 1 minute, no more than 2 minutes of silence or prayer at the beginning of a school day.
Yeah.
And then a second part of what this does is it kind of cleans up some of the language in existing law about if a parent for 1 hour a week wants to pull their child out, or have an organization pull their child out and have moral or religious education off the school grounds, it kind of puts together and consolidates the existing law on those frameworks. So tell us a little bit about those. What motivated this, and what are some issues, or what are some examples?
Yeah, I think these were two bills that came together. SB 19 was on its own, and then HB 607 brought in the release time moral instruction updates. So SB 19, to allow for just a moment of silence, it's been in our statute, and it's been a may. So this made it a shall to require that. And I think when you think about the chaos of getting your kids to school and all of that stress coming into the school day, maybe a loud, crazy bus ride, it just makes sense to have kids sit down. Just sit, take a deep breath. If you want to pray, pray. If you don't want to pray, you just want to meditate and you just want to rest. If you want to catch an extra 2 minutes of sleep.
Right.
But really, it really lays a good groundwork of just starting the school day with a little calm, a little reflection. And I don't see where the harm is in that. We're not obviously directing a student to pray. It's just giving them the opportunity to have a moment to themselves.
So just to be clear, this is not teacher-led prayer.
No.
The kids are not required to pray, and the teacher is not leading them in prayer. But if they want to pray on their own in their seat, fine. Okay, we'll talk a little bit about that second part of the bill and a couple of more bills that might interest you, some changes in the law there in the next segment. And then we'll talk about some new legislation that Lindsay's working on. We'll come back, stay with us after the break.
to Kentucky's Voice Radio online at kyvoice.org.
Welcome back to Kentucky's Voice on 970 AM. We're also on TV tonight at 4 p.m. on Spectrum 21. That's WBNA. And then we also will have a YouTube rebroadcast of this that you can find online. Just find somebody. Even look for Kentucky's Voice on Facebook if you'd like. Okay, let's pick it up. We got a lot of stuff to cover still. The second part of that bill, we're talking about moral and religious instruction. That kind of sounds a little bit odd. I don't remember doing anything like that when I was a kid, but this actually isn't particularly new.
Right.
There was a Supreme Court case in 1952 that actually ruled this perfectly constitutional, and of all places, New York. And basically, the Constitution doesn't say separation of church and state. What it says is we're not going to restrict the free expression of religion, and we're not going to establish religion. So the parameters that case set forward and the Supreme Court set forward is you can't have this on school grounds. It has to happen somewhere else, and it has to be completely voluntary. The parent basically has to say, yes, for 1 hour a week, I want my child to have moral instruction in addition to the other stuff that we're teaching in school. So talk a little bit about this. Just go ahead.
Yeah. So what this bill does, it really just puts a framework around existing statute that has been in place for almost 85 years at this point. And that Supreme Court ruling really laid that precedent that has not been challenged for 3/4 of a century. So basically, it's allowing students whose parents give them consent to be pulled out off campus at again, an optional, if parents want to sign their kids up for this and they give consent, they can get pulled out for that moral biblical instruction. And it's not just biblical, but a lot of the programs, the one program that's in the news right now is LifeWise, which is a Christian organization, which will be teaching biblical from a biblical perspective. And so that's what we're looking at here. And you're right, there's a lot of discussion about it. There's a lot of outrage about separation of church and state. And I don't think people really know their history, especially, or the law, exactly, or if they've been following in the last couple of Supreme Court rulings that have come out that have reestablished that foundational principle of religious liberty in America and a parent's ability to the care, custody, and control of their children, upholding the 14th Amendment. So, when you look at like the depth of history behind this and the Supreme Court rulings, it's hard to make an argument against this. And the separation of church and state is a very weak one because it does not apply to this. It has nothing to do with this, as it's an optional thing and it's off campus. It's not funded by the schools. It's all privately funded. It's all done off campus.
And with the parents' permission.
And with the parents' permission, absolutely. But when you look historically, if we want to go really far back, you go to 1647 and the Old Deluder Satan Act. And that was the foundation of all public schools to begin on this land in America. And that was to establish kids' ability to read so that they could know Scripture. That was it. That was the purpose of the Old Deluder Satan Act, the first law establishing public schools in America. So, there's a lot of history there. There's a lot to be argued.
We don't need to go into all of that.
Yeah, we don't need to.
So an elementary school in Oldham County is considering and likely will have a pilot program to just see how it goes. Locust Grove Elementary, it might be in the news. Kind of search for that. And so the Oldham County School Board is thinking about approving this. What's the hope for this law? What is the motivation for it? What good is this going to do potentially?
Well, I will tell you, a lot of the issues that drew me in to run for office were what kind of was exposed during the COVID stuff when everybody got locked in and we started to see what was really going on inside of the schools. And if people try to argue there's no moral instruction going on in the schools, there is. It's just from a secular perspective. And we saw that with the DEI, again, with the gender ideology, with CRT, all of those things. SEL, social emotional learning, which is kind of under that whole umbrella of critical race theory and critical theory in general. But that was being forced on our children and still is. And schools across America, across Kentucky, have these social emotional programs. It's very hard to get your child exempted from those programs. I've had parents who have tried, and it is a battle to get them out of that program. So this is an alternative that we can offer moral instruction outside of the school, optional, so that they can get a moral a moral instruction that's from a biblical foundation as opposed to a secular foundation.
Right. And I think the theme of this bill is we want to give parents a little bit more empowerment over what their child's education looks like, even if it's a public school.
Yeah.
The children do not belong to the state; they belong to parents.
Absolutely.
And so they should be the guiding light in their children's education and the path their children take.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you look at what we're teaching them, just the foundations of the 10 Commandments, why would it ever be bad to teach a kid not to lie, to teach a kid not to steal, to teach that it's wrong to murder, that you shouldn't covet, your friend's stuff? Like all of those are great principles that our nation was founded on. Why would we not want to build up their character on those moral biblical principles?
Right. Okay. Another change. This is maybe a little bit lighter, but we're getting into actually reading and writing.
Yeah.
What can be more basic?
Yep.
So SB 167 was actually passed the year before, but it's not going to go into effect until this school year.
Right.
So Lindsay Titchener wrote this bill. It basically requires that cursive writing be taught in elementary and that students have to be capable of doing that by the 5th grade. Mm-hmm. So tell me a little bit about that. What motivated you to file this? Get this passed?
The motivation was just a student I was with at the History Museum who was probably a high schooler, and they laid out the Kentucky Constitution, the original document, and I said, I bet you can't even read that. And he said, I can't even sign my name. And he had to have been 14, 15, 16 years old. And I'm thinking, that is absolutely insane. So that was the foundation of this. And when I started to do my research, Common Core pulled it out as the digital age came in. And now, unfortunately, every student has a Chromebook in their hands or some device for their school day. We stopped requiring just that basic pencil to paper. And what that develops in a student is incredible. There are tons of studies out there that show that it helps to activate the brain and both sides of the brain. It helps them with comprehension, with spelling, obviously, with fine motor skills, memorization, helps them learn how to read. They use it to help students with dyslexia learn how to read.
Right.
And with our literacy proficiency levels so low across the state of Kentucky, why would we not bring this back?
Right.
And then you think about how fun it is for a little kindergartner to be able to learn how to sign their name like their moms or their first graders.
Right.
They want to do those things.
Or
and they
sign
want
a check eventually.
Sign a check, sign their permit.
Yep.
You have to sign your permit when you get it now. So
okay. HB 240. This is an interesting and a really important one if your children are very young. They're just starting off. What this does, and it was passed by Timmy Truitt, a representative in Eastern Kentucky as well. If a child is going to advance from kindergarten or first grade going forward, they are going to have to be able to pass some reading benchmarks, some tests at the end of that school year, or they will repeat the grade. You heard that right. And so why is it important to do this, to not just move a child on?
Well, we're seeing, again, those proficiency levels in Kentucky are in the 30s for reading. That's absolutely unacceptable. And then you have graduation rates in the 90s. So we're graduating students who are not proficient in the basic skill of reading. And it's because of No Child Left Behind. Unfortunately, good intentions, but what we've seen out of that are a lot of children who are not equipped when they graduate to be able to go on and be successful in life because they're having to backtrack and figure out how to learn how to read. When you really understand what parents have been fighting this, they have asked for their kids to be held back, and they're not allowed to do it. They haven't been allowed to do that. And so you have students who are just moving on and on and on, and parents are then trying to find outside help in their schools and from their schools because they're not getting it in the schools.
Right.
I mean, this is just the most foundational part of our education system. They have to learn how to read.
Well, I mean, and the bottom line is, you're at school in order to learn skills.
Yes.
If you don't have those skills, we shouldn't be social promoting kids.
No.
There are kids that are graduating from Jefferson County public schools today that cannot read. Graduating from high school that cannot read. We've got to stop that.
Yeah.
And if the kids don't start off right, if they don't have that ability to read at the start, they just continue to fall further and further behind as we go.
Every other subject is hurting because of that. Science scores are in the single digits in Kentucky.
Okay. So we don't have a ton of time.
Okay.
The new session, there's a new session that's going to be starting in January. What are your ideas on that? It's going to be a budget year. Do you have any thoughts on that budget just to start off?
Well, not off the top of my head. There's a lot of things that we're going to have to factor in. A lot of education funding, and that's always a top issue. And really looking at, is that being utilized well? Medicaid stuff, all of that's going to be with the federal changes that are coming. So yeah, we're paying very, very close attention to all of that. For me personally, in order to make sure our education funding is in place, we have got to get DEI out of our schools. Our federal funding will be shut off if they do not get DEI out of our schools. And that doesn't mean just changing a name. So legislation that I filed last year, I'll be refiling this year again to, I call it the Keep Education Accountability Protection Act or something like that. And so, we're going to make sure that our schools are focused on the right things.
Let the teachers teach.
Let's
not worry about all this side stuff.
No. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, that's a good transition. So, new legislation.
Yeah.
I know we've had a lot of discussions about the data centers.
Yeah.
I know you're thinking about filing some legislation related to data centers.
Yeah.
Just talk about that and maybe some other ideas that bills you might want to file.
Yeah, so a couple of things with the data centers, which unfortunately the AI movement is not stoppable at this point. I have some ethical disagreements with AI in general, but there's going to be some great things. That's another show. So data centers in particular, this kind of hit me in the face when one was proposed in our county, and really realizing our county was not prepared. Our local government was not prepared. And none of them are, because none of them knew, minus, a year ago or less, that what a hyperscale data center was and what impacts that could have. Now we know. So I think looking at a statewide regulation to make sure there are some parameters in place that counties can say, okay, we have to at least do this. And then their local zoning boards can make those right decisions. And then also making sure our electric bills aren't affected by these big corporations coming in for data centers. And we don't want to see rates go up for the average citizen. It needs to fall on the data center. It doesn't need to fall on us. So putting something in place there.
Right. I think those are reasonable things. Now, most of these zoning issues are really local issues. We want to keep them local. But there are some things like the state government regulates all of these utility companies through the Public Service Commission, and we might want to put some legislation in place for that.
Right.
Okay. We're coming almost to the end of our session. I want to thank State Senator Lindsay Tishner, who is the vice chair of the Senate Education Committee. She's going to be filing for re-election. If you want to support her, go to Titchener for Kentucky, spell all that out, .com. And I just want to thank you again for all of your work at the legislature, and best of luck in your coming campaign. Do you have a campaign fundraiser coming